being straightforward with all of you, I'm primarily active in the Django community. I've done several talks over there, but through my time working at Upsun, formerly we rebranded this year from Platform SH to Upsun, I've gotten the opportunity to work with so many different clients using Drupal and working on their infra. But today I want to talk about how AI has affected infrastructure, particularly from the hosting side of things, from hosting providers. Quick background, my name is Michael Riley. I am an elite cloud support engineer at Upsun. Did not want to do that. I'm an elite cloud support engineer at Upsun. As I said earlier, I've worked with many different Drupal sites of every size, from Fortune 500s to small businesses and even mid-sized enterprises. Like many on my team, I spend most of my days working on PHP performance and bots. Outside of work, I'm the founder of The Right Softworks. I do some IT consulting in the US, primarily Django development. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm primarily in the Django community. This is my first experience and first talk ever within the Drupal community or any Drupal conference. Really excited and nervous at the same time, but let's get on with it. So we're going to define a term here. What is a stampede? Because depending on what you're working with, it can kind of have a different meaning. For this talk, we're going to be talking about, for this talk, the stampede is shorthand for coordinated distributed bot traffic at a volume that breaks the normal traffic that you would have saw 2 to 3 years ago when AI was just kind of more becoming widely used. It wasn't as widely used in software development or everyday life. ChatGPT wasn't as big. Let's see. This isn't just one angry script on a VPS. Nowadays, it's something completely different. Let's move on. Transparent, this is going to be more of a technical talk. We're going to be talking about Fastly VCL, JA3 and JA4 hashes, as well as ClickHouse, which, to my understanding, isn't often talked about in the Drupal community. And we're also going to be talking about Drupal caching, many different topics as well. That's just a small subset. I'll show you what's worked in production over the last 4 years I've worked at Upsun, as well as I'd prefer if you guys have any questions, to please let me know. We'll have a Q&A towards the end if we can. Not too sure about time right now. But this is the typical Drupal environment that I usually see at Upsun. Most of the CDN that we see is Fastly in front of it. Some environments may have Akamai, others can have Cloudflare, but for the purpose of this talk, we're going to be primarily focusing on Fastly. We can also see here that MariaDB is usually the database of choice, along with Apache Solr. A lot of our larger customers will have Solr deployed on their Drupal environment, so that's one thing to consider. Now, who would be hitting your sites? If you would have asked around, if you would have asked that question 2 years ago, it would usually just be search crawlers such as Google bot, Bing bots, and legitimate users, but maybe the occasional social media crawler. Nowadays, it's actually quite different. So we're seeing scraping bots trying to get as much information from large language models, as well as a lot of different bots or malicious actors potentially trying to mimic legitimate user agents or legitimate traffic, when in actuality it's not legitimate traffic. So let's move on. In support for Upsun, we monitor and respond to sites down across thousands of projects. We have on-call shifts. We have someone always looking at these outages to make sure that our customer sites can have as maximum uptime as we can allow. Since ChatGPT and Claude kind of arrived, on-call has gotten dramatically louder in the last year or two. 2024, we started to see a shift, or not 2024, 2025, we started to see a beginning of a shift. 2026, it was like a bomb went off. The on-call shifts significantly have changed in the amount of alerts that we've seen, the amount of site downs that we've seen from bot traffic. And the new skill for our on-call engineers is telling whether it's a real outage from a AI scraper Stampede. Trying to identify it, because usually when we look at an outage, 9 times out of 10, it's like, is it bot? Oh, yep, it is. Okay. That's how our on-call shift life has kind of shifted. To kind of give a more visual of how things have changed. Right here, at the top, you'll see a Linux command that will tail the access log for the last 5,000 requests. And in 2024 to the beginning of 2025, usually most of the malicious traffic that we would see, whether it's from script kiddies or just amateur people trying to take down a site, usually it's one IP. We would see that a lot. It would usually be fairly simple. Then when AI started to show up on the scene, we started to see not a lot of the snippet wouldn't really show as much, but what we noticed is sequential traffic from IPs, from IP ranges. So 471.1.10, let's say for example, we would see that. We'd look a couple requests down, and we would see that the last few digits of numbers would just incrementally go up and with requests. So we were seeing like 1,000 IPs being used to hit this one particular site and scrape it. We had to evolve with how this traffic has evolved in terms of bots, and aggregating it by 16 ranges or 20 to find out what the real culprit of what malicious activities happened has become very essential to us. That wasn't what we saw 2 years ago. What we also had to keep in mind now with having to deal with these big IP ranges is that we need to know who owns those blocks before we block it, because since we're out of the host, since we're a web host, we usually can't do it. We have to do it on a per customer basis, but we also have to be very careful on making sure that we don't block something that could be legitimate. So, for example, we've seen it on residential IP addresses. Well, we can't go ahead and block a residential IP ISP from accessing the site, otherwise the customer can't get business. So we have to be very creative with our solutions here moving forward. In terms of client communications, so let's talk about that now, because HTTPS is what the web uses nowadays. That's a given fact. HTTP is pretty much dead. Let's Encrypt is a thing. We should be encrypting our sites. This gives us TLS fingerprinting, which up until this kind of had started, I had not really known much about, but it allows us to, still incredibly nervous here. Thank you. TLS fingerprints allows us to be able to pinpoint where traffic may be coming from and allow us to block it. Because the user agent can be trivially spoofed nowadays, and in fact, what we're seeing now is that that's being used at mass scale. We sometimes would occasionally see user agents being spoofed, but nowadays it's a regular occurrence. It's much more common. We're also using the TLS fingerprints and headers to figure out what languages is requesting. The accept languages and accepted codings are very useful signals to figure out where malicious traffic might be coming from, because it's probably no shocker that most of the abusive traffic that we've seen is from China, Singapore, and those types of clouds that kind of have a little bit more of a history, so to speak. I don't want to go into too much details there, but that's where we're seeing most of the visa traffic from. So if we can see that it's requesting Chinese, and well, this is an English site or this is a Greek site, they shouldn't be requesting Chinese here. We can kind of take that into account and figure out how to block traffic more effectively. So whenever I'm talking to the customer, this is one of the key things that I bring up. Whenever it comes to bot traffic, the edge is your first line of defense. Every request that reaches Drupal costs you CPU. You want to be caching as much as you can to protect your site and also to protect your resources, because you shouldn't, if someone's hitting the page over and over again, you shouldn't be wasting CPU to get that page over and over again. The edge is the first line, just not only for that, but also for filtering, because you can use other types of mitigation measures in the edge so that it will never even talk to the origin. The edge will see the TLS handshake. We spoke about client communications earlier. The origin will never see it. So you want to have some sort of edge in place so that you can do this sort of TLS and level filtering. Fastly, it can often, oh, my clicker does that a lot. Fastly can inspect, rate limit, and reject traffic usually, well, it can rate limit traffic before it hits the origin, and that's the key factor. I'm sorry to be repeating myself, but I really cannot drive it home much further. It's cheaper to drop the bot immediately rather than wasting resources. This is where J3 and J4 fingerprinting comes in. We just talked about that. So the flow of traffic from the edge is going to go from the edge layer to your hosting provider to the application. Those are the 3 steps that a client will take. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of things now. The hard problems that these are the problems that I deal with every week. This is a list of what we're going to be talking about. This is some of them we might skip depending on time. I don't have a timer, so I don't know how. We're good. Okay. We're going to go through this list. The hardest one is going to be bots versus humans, because every false positive is a user that's going to be turned away. We're going to be so I mentioned J3 hashes earlier, J4 hashes, client communications. Observability is a key factor into reining that data in. You want to be able to have that data readily available, because this is not going to show up in the access logs. J3 and J4 hashes will usually be logged to some third-party endpoint or something else, like S3, SFTP, BigQuery, or ClickHouse. Those type of data stores that will allow you to store as much data about what traffic you're seeing as you can. So then if I want to go back to it later, I can say, okay, at this time, show me all the J3 hash, the top J3 hashes for this time period. I can go back and see that. The access logs does not log this information, and therefore, when you need to actually do some sort of high-level block that isn't just an IP or user agent, you need to refer to, you have to have some sort of data warehouse. Well, warehouse is kind of the wrong term, but you need to have some sort of form of observability in order to effectively be able to utilize this information. You can't just have it being logged in the thin air. But if you can't deal with this, one thing I wanted to note for access logs, LNAV is a great tool for kind of, if you like to use SQL and you want to query an access log like SQL, LNAV is a great analysis tool. And another note, in terms of what we use at Upsum, we ingest all this information into BigQuery. It's not cheap, but it scales, it works. We know it will work when we need it. ClickHouse, ClickHouse is great, but I don't have too much experience with it. I've been messing with it for the last few months, but if you want to self-host it, that's where you should probably go. You want an analytical database or some sort of time series like Influx maybe. Okay. More to add on to observability. You want to instrument everything you can. The full log, the full request context, not just the status codes, because when you need to go back after an outage to figure out, okay, where was this traffic coming from? What happened? What can we put into place so that we can try to either have a run book ready for when this happens again, or we can prevent it from happening again. You want to have as much data as possible. This includes a J3 hash, the ASN, which an ASN, for those who don't know what it is, it's an identifier for IP blocks of who owns an IP block. When you're looking to see who owns a block of IPs, you usually want to search up the ASN for it, and sometimes it's straightforward, other times it's not. It might be under a parent, a subsidiary may be renting an IP block from a parent company or someone who's completely unrelated, so you won't really be able to get that information, but it's a coin flip, essentially. If you can build dashboards for this, do it. It will save you a lot of time, a lot of trouble, and when you need to do it when you need to review the data in a crisis, it saves so much time. I cannot recommend that enough. Whether you're using Victoria metrics or Grafana, Datadog, Fastly does log to a bunch of different observability solutions. So you can use some, you likely have a solution if you have observability that will work with Fastly. So let's proceed. Okay, traffic volume. What have we been seeing? Bot traffic routinely exceeds human traffic by 3 to 10 times on public sites, depending on the visibility of the site, how popular it is. We've seen this jump in traffic before, where a customer may have an allocated amount of bandwidth and they just completely blow through it. And they're like, what happened? We didn't see any user increases, engagement. It was just bots. And bursts can arrive in minutes, not hours. It often happens very suddenly, and you're going to have to react to that. It's a sad reality, but most of the time that's what happens. There are some solutions that will try to react on your behalf, but from what I've seen, those are very expensive solutions. Like, we're talking 40 grand a year solutions, something that some companies just simply cannot afford. It's unfortunate, but this is the reality we kind of live in. Many scrapers, such as ScrapeHive, will crawl the sitemap end to end, try to crawl every page until it has every bit of information from your site. And it doesn't care whether your site's online or not. It will just keep on doing it. That's the pattern we've been seeing with these crawlers. They just don't, they have no regard for whether the sites that they're trying to train data on stays online. In fact, they use some shading methods just to accomplish their goals, such as spoofing their, changing their user agent, or even spoofing, or trying to spoof their J3 hash. I've seen that too, which we'll also touch on this later. So scaling. We talked a little bit about how bandwidth has gotten out of control for customers. The same goes for resources. We've seen customers suddenly have to get auto-scaled, or we have to upsize them in order to meet the demand, because simply the amount of the bot traffic that we've been seeing from them, while our on-call engineer can react, it's still happening enough to where it's causing downtime for them. So we'll sometimes upsize them, but that's not always a guarantee, because scaling horizontally can sometimes just let more requests in. It doesn't stop the bleeding, so to speak. It just simply lets more traffic in, and the bot will just take you up on your offer, like, oh, you're giving me more room for traffic? Okay, I'm gonna give you more, and it just falls over again. You need to know, last note for scaling, you need to know your application's weaknesses, bottlenecks, areas of improvement so that when your site does go offline, and if it's your infra team from your hosting provider or your own DevOps people, they need to know where the application is weak so that they can kind of look in those areas to see, is this an application issue being exacerbated by the large amount of traffic? Or, because sometimes it may cause more confusion. We see something that looks like app issues, and then come to find out it's kind of bot traffic just hitting the weaker pages that normally wouldn't be hit as much. You'll sometimes see that as well. Even if it isn't at the same rate as what I would normally see with other bots, like 2,000 requests in a few minutes. Okay, well, what if there's 200 requests going to this one weak page? Well, the site still fell over. So it's nice to know if I'm looking in the access logs and I'm seeing this particular page getting hit and response time's massive and the site's falling over, it's like, okay, well, we know what's happening now. I need to filter traffic to that one particular path. Oh, and I went back. So, we talked about Deceit a little bit, how AI scrapers have kind of been using that as a tactic. Here are a list of things not to trust. User agent, that is a given nowadays. Just because you see a legitimate user agent does not mean it's truly that. Doesn't mean that you're seeing a bunch of bot traffic from supposedly iPhones, doesn't mean it's from an iPhone or a legitimate user. You kind of have to, use your own cleverness to figure out where the traffic, the troublesome traffic lies. X42 or X44. Clients can also inject in there. Be careful there. I had mentioned that TLS fingerprints being exploited. What some people do not know is that there are libraries widely available that allow you to mimic a TLS fingerprint of the most common Chrome, a modern version of Chrome, and it's indistinguishable for J3 and J4 hashes. We've seen that too quite often this year. We have other mitigations for that. In the interest of time for this talk, I did not go into those specific subjects. I will mention that OHFP headers and the acceptable coding that we mentioned earlier, that is another step that you can use to try to figure this out if TLS isn't working, but these libraries are widely available. It's just a matter of time before more malicious parties decide to use them. You can even combine the most common Python library for scraping content alongside it. It's very easy to do. Also to mention, Claude will make it easy for someone who has kind of new to the subject to be able to pull it off. Okay, we talked about J3 and J4 fingerprints for a while. Now here is what it actually looks like. We can see that it's a hash here. J3 and J4, the difference between the two. J4 is the modern equivalent nowadays. J3 isn't so much widely used anymore. J4, I think both of these were developed by Salesforce, correct me if I'm wrong, not 100% sure. I know one of these was developed by Salesforce. So they were the ones that led the initiative for that, to be able to kind of do this level of filtering, which Fastly and other CDN providers started to incorporate into it, which it's a great tool. The reasoning for using this, rotating IPs is trivial nowadays. We've seen traffic hit, we've blocked, at the very beginning of this bot crusade, we started blocking the traffic and then found that new traffic from new IPs would just spin up 5 to 10 minutes later. It was like playing whack-a-mole. It just wasn't feasible. So this is where that J3 and J4 hashes come in. It allows us to filter traffic by the TLS fingerprint. I believe we have another slide that kind of goes into detail about what TLS fingerprints kind of are, but right. I was originally going to do a live demonstration and kind of showing you how Fastly can ship these logs. Unfortunately, I found out earlier today that it requires Fastly support to enable something, so I won't be able to show this live today. I'm really disappointed. I had a site set up for it to kind of do a live demo, but yeah, this is mostly what I've already said. We talked about using ClickHouse. You want to use that so that you can search your data in seconds. Fastly is one of the providers that offer this, to my knowledge, in an easily and accessible fashion. Let's talk about VCL. Fastly is built upon a Varnish control language. Varnish is a caching solution. When Fastly was kind of starting out, Fastly VCL and Varnish control language are kind of a little bit different because it's a fork essentially. The modern Varnish control language is not the same as what's available on Fastly, but I had mentioned at the beginning of this talk that it's a great tool for filtering and scripting blocks. We can see right here that in the receive function, it will check for whether a traffic matches an registered ASN. And it will just give it a 403 if it finds it under that. This is a great tool for blocking traffic before it hits the organ. You can also do it by user agent. The nature of a scriptable languages for blocks is it's a fantastic tool for having to deal with these AI bots and being able to reactively put more changes in front of it, and it will go into effect in minutes. It's great for an on-call engineer. Some things to note, ASN blocks, as I kind of mentioned, I don't remember. ASN blocks can be overly aggressive. You need to be sure that what you're blocking is not going to have false positives. Some customers will use geoblocks. That can be an option for them. Some customers, it's not. If they're a worldwide e-commerce site, for example, or a worldwide CMS, you just lose real users. It's a tough call. You're going to make mistakes. That's just kind of a reality nowadays, but sometimes you have to block legitimate users in order to allow for your site to recover. Would you rather have a subset of your users unavailable or all of them? You got to pick one. VCL, as I mentioned, very customizable. You can block it in J3 hashes. It's not shown here. You do it by VCL. We talked about IP blocks a bit. Now, moving away from AI crawlers for a minute. SEO crawlers, they have been around for years. Sometimes they've brought down sites if they're poorly configured. Some of them are overly aggressive. Not every crawler is hostile, but be very mindful that I have noticed the meta crawler in particular has become very aggressive as of lately. Whether it's someone signing up their account for Instagram for their business and then within 24 hours getting crawled to a halt. I've seen that happen so many times this year. And I've had to weigh the option of whether do I want to block the crawler and then their rankings fall. That's another thing. With these SEO crawlers, it's an additional step. You have to take into consideration that their SEO ranking, you don't want it to drop. You don't want it to get worse. So you have to be very careful with what you do in concerns to SEO crawlers. I do have a story for this later if time will allow, but let's see. We already talked about a lot of this. I'm just going to elect to skip this. How are we doing for time? Sorry.
8 minutes.
8 minutes. Again, I think we did talk about at the beginning using -16 blocks to figure out which IPs are at the top. I'm going to skip this as well.
30 minutes. So.
What?
30 minutes.
30?
13.
13, okay. Okay, this is a demo I was going to do. This is kind of more of a visual of what you would have been seeing. When you would query ClickHouse, you could see when, for the last 10 minutes, what are the top GA3 hashes? We could see at the top that the Python request library is the top. Well, we're seeing it from 12,000 IP addresses. There is no reason, unless the developers are pulling a prank on you, that should be happening. And that is a big red flag. And being able to block those 12,000 IPs manually in an ACL will be a nightmare. With a J3 or J4 hash, takes seconds. You just block the J3 hash that's truncated, put it in BCL, activate the environment, and just wait for it to be applied to all the points of presence, and you're done. I wish I could have done a flight demo, but hey. Okay, so the meta crawler that I was talking about earlier. For this scenario, we had a customer that was getting crawled to a halt. And I had to think, this was kind of the first time that I had the opportunity to deal with the meta crawler. And I saw it was so aggressive that I started to think, I'm like, okay, well, Googlebot nowadays will ignore robots.txt. I have no idea if this crawler is going to respect robots.txt, because that's another thing. Some legitimate ones just ignore it. They just expect you to give an HTTP 429 saying it's too many requests and back off. So I did some, my coworker nicknamed this a dice roll block, because all it did here is just roll a random int from 10 to, from 0 to 100. And if it fit from 0 to 10, it would just block that request. And it was effective because there's another BCL that's not here, but it would inject a reply to the bot that says, try calling this again in 600 seconds. And when it saw the 429, it immediately backed off within minutes. The CPU usage went from 100% to like maybe 10. It's a very effective method to just randomly block traffic from a user agent and then dial it back once you're comfortable that, okay, I think 1% request is not going to damage my SEO enough to where I can leave this for a day. And I've done that in customer sites before, and their SEO has remained strong. Otherwise, yeah, it's just going to cause your site to go to a crawling halt. You may have to tune that random roll, but it's like trial and error. You're going to have to do that in order to figure out what's best for your scenario. Okay, so the Drupal aspect here. I had mentioned that you should have a CDN in front of it. Never expose origin without a CDN. Here are some app-related suggestions for trying to make sure that the config and caching is done effectively. I'm actually probably just going to leave this on for about 20, 30 seconds, or 15. Anyone want to take a picture? I'm going to move on because, yeah, I want to do a QA if we could. Well, how much time?
5 to 7 minutes.
Okay. Real quick, we're just going to try to speed through this. Something to note, expect things to fail. You need to plan for this eventuality. Dealing with AI bots, it's mostly reactive. You're not going to, you may have one book ready, it may not be one-to-one perfect for what happens, and you're gonna have to adapt. You need to know your app, know which critical features that you can turn off the shed load if it ultimately comes to it, and you want to practice these incidents. We talked about this mostly, so let's move on. So a common runbook for anyone that is curious, this is what I do for on-call. I'll check the dashboard to see if the cache is dropping, check the top IPs, the 16 blocks of the last 5,000 requests, J3 hashes, ASNs, and then maybe start writing VCL at that point to figure out, okay, how can I mitigate this? And then I'll run HTOP to see if the load drops. If it doesn't, I'll go back to the drawing board, repeat, rinse and repeat, and then I'll make note of that VCL snippet. If it's noteworthy, I will send it to the rest of the team. We share VCL snippets very often. It's very effective to help us on call. We're all in this together. War stories, I think, nah, let's skip it. I did talk about the meta crawler. If anyone's curious, I can talk about this outside of the session. More general rules for scraper bot defense. Good information here. More takeaways. A lot of just overviews. Give it another 15 seconds. Okay. We talked about VCL already. Okay. So special thanks here to these folks for for allowing me to give this presentation today, share all this knowledge with you folks. Also want to again thank the Drupal Dev Days Athens staff for allowing me to do this talk, the Drupal community. And then lastly, I want to thank the folks at Fastly, ClickHouse, BigQuery, and John Altos, and his team, who did develop J3 and J4 hashes that allow us to deal with this madness. It makes our job so much more bearable. Without it, it would be madness. And Roger Houston. Do we have any questions?
Do you also use JavaScript bot challenges, which are sometimes user-facing and can be bad for users, but was this an effective way for dealing with bots for you?
Normally, no. So I see that a lot in the Cloudflare. I believe Fastly has it under an additional sellable, so we don't usually use that much. And it's kind of been becoming more of a reality that, It's become more of a reality that AI and software has kind of progressed to be able to bypass those types of challenges. I've seen that in the Cloudflare, so many points of proofs of concept. So that's not usually something we'll put in place because there's usually other better methods. Any other questions?
Thanks for the presentation. It is mind-blowing at some parts because we've been fighting these bots, sometimes with your team. I don't know how many requests I raised on Absan in the last couple of months. Do you have any suggestions on or ideas, what could be used for smaller clients that cannot afford Fastly or Cloudflare? And sometimes, even on Absan, we don't have the option to spin up a varnish container because they don't have that much money to pay in hosting. Any ideas would help.
I hear you. I will acknowledge that there is a European company called Bunny CDN that has popped up in the last 3 years. They've been doing, their solutions are still improving. It's not nearly as equal for the rest of the industry, but it is more affordable. So if you are looking for that option, Bunny CDN is something that I can kind of recommend. I have not used its bot mitigation, so I can't speak as to how good it will mitigate bot traffic. But if you need a CDN, that's an option. Fastly did introduce a free tier within the last year or two. So they are an option now instead of having to pay, I think it was around 40 to 70 a month or something for just starting out. I know that they also kind of charge more on a per quest basis, which kind of can turn off some folks from wanting to use it. But if you need a truly good solution, unfortunately, it's kind of become more of, you're gonna have to pay a lot for it. it's just kind of what the industry is heading towards, unfortunately.
Same for Cloudflare, their free plan, which we have because of customer side.
So the problem with Cloudflare and Fastly at the moment for some of our clients is that they require you to hand over CDN, to hand over your domain records. And for reasons that I'm not really aware of, clients in Europe don't really want that. We know the benefits. It has been very hard for us to sell this to the client and sell it. I mean, even make them consider it. So we've been fighting bots with Nginx and Apache blocking, which is very, very hard.
Right, so Fastly doesn't require you to manage their DNS. I know Cloudflare does require it for, but you can use an external DNS provider, point it at Cloudflare, and it will take it. I have done that in the last week. It is an option. I do know that a lot of companies in our past space have been investing a lot into their edge, us included, to try to deal with this so that our customers can have some sort of solution that is kind of more tailored towards their platform of choice. And more platforms are going to probably have to end up doing that nowadays because that's the direction we're heading with these large language models. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we out of time or any more?
We have 1 minute.
Any more questions?
Yes, I recently read a study that mentioned that over last couple of years, the traffics to some sites have dropped by almost like 90%, the user traffic, not the bot traffic, because a lot of people have been using the AI overview of search engines. And what that means for the sites is that you probably cannot now block a lot of these AI crawlers like Google AI crawlers or OpenAI crawlers, because if you block them, then you won't appear in their AI search overview results.
Right.
So, but what I have seen is that a lot of these crawlers, they just bombard the site, don't respect rate limit set in robot.txt and all those things. So are there any strategies which allow us to allow the crawlers to crawl the site but still respect some kind of rate limits, or just do it ethically?
Right, so I had mentioned the meta that we injected headers to have it crawl it again. That is probably the best way forward because the AI companies, to be clear, 90% of the traffic that I've been discussing like today are not from Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini. It's all these other like large language models that usually have nothing to do with that sort of visibility. So in 2024, it was a problem with Claude. We were seeing a lot of user agents from them kind of being aggressive. Eventually that tapered off. We stopped seeing a lot of outages caused by Claude. And to be honest, I was a little bit skeptical on whether that was, because that was just from the user agent. Anyone can use that user agent. It could have been malicious traffic too, so it wasn't entirely clear. But generally, from what I'm seeing, they've had it well in mind that they'll respect it and not cause too much problems. But yeah, just setting appropriate headers to tell it to try again later. It should respect back-off signals if it's truly supposed to be a good source of knowledge. I wouldn't consider it a good source of knowledge if it didn't respect those sites. A simple back-off, I mean, that's just so basic nowadays. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. If any folks have any questions, I'll be out in the hallway as well and still wandering through the conference. Thank you so much, everyone.